Hello, everyone. A very pleasant good evening to you, wherever you might be listening to the From the Bench podcast. I'm your host, Mark Janish. As promised, we're going to take about the next 10 to 15 minutes to take a glance at the Major League Baseball standings and playoff positioning. With 2 weeks left in the season, the excitement and action appears to be in the wild card race in the American League, and of course, the National League division and wild card races as well. I'm Mark Janish. You can go to my site at accessmediaglobal.com. This and any other podcast can be heard on Libsyn, Spotify, and or Stitcher Radio. Once again, it's the From the Bench podcast. I'm your host, Mark Janish, and as I promised earlier in the week, I was going to give you a brief look here at the MLB, Major League Baseball standings in the United States. Now, I understand baseball is not necessarily popular in every region of the world, but I want to just fulfill a promise and indulge my listeners for just a few minutes. We're going to take a look at some things today. First of all, let's go ahead and look at what's currently on the website that's new. Okay. The highlights from American football: the Los Angeles Rams, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Los Angeles Raiders. Highlights and video press conferences and recaps have been posted. They were just posted, so they're going to be fresh for you. Seeing as how we're approaching early morning on the East Coast of the United States and on the Central Time Zone and the Pacific Time Zone, we're about an hour and 43 minutes away from the midnight hour here in Southern California. Wanted to get those up for you for your perusal for tomorrow. Wanted to also get this podcast up. You can also listen to Jimmy Traina, Gus Johnson, the SI Media Podcast. You can also look at the weekly podcast with an overview of baseball with highlights, scores, reactions, analysis from Buster Olney. That's the Buster Olney Baseball Podcast on the homepage. Just go to MLB Baseball and you will see Buster's picture there. You will also see an on-air microphone picture for the podcast featuring Gus Johnson and Jimmy Traina, the Arts 19 version of the podcast. And then, of course, the Total Soccer Show, which I post weekly. These guys are very good at perusing the soccer world. You can go to the soccer page as well. You can also go to the baseball page, get more information, some Twitter feeds of some specific regional teams if you like. Also for the soccer page as well. That's how the website is pretty much laid out, but I want you to go ahead and enjoy those. And even if I'm not talking about them, there are feeds available where you can just click on the headline that you want to investigate, and you can go ahead and do that. I also have the Extra Time MLS podcast for Friday the 14th, just a couple of days ago. That's the latest one they posted. Very interesting race between LAFC, the Seattle Sounders, and so forth going into the latter stages of the MLS season here with about 3 months to go. So let's go ahead and get to the topic of the podcast, which is baseball. Going to looking at the baseball scores. Not necessarily baseball scores. We're going to go just take a quick, brief look at the playoff picture with 2 weeks left to go. As I said, things are getting to be very clear now. There's some distance being put between top teams and lower tier teams in the American League, but in the National League, it's getting very interesting. Tonight, the Los Angeles Dodgers lost to the St. Louis Cardinals, winning 3 out of 4. A tremendous amount of hitting has been done in the home run area by Yasiel Puig. He had 3 home runs and 7 RBIs yesterday in a game that was televised nationally here on the West Coast of the United States. We don't get to see many Dodger games because we essentially have been blacked out by various cable providers who are not in the area and will not be in the area anytime soon. I think we're on our 5th year of blackout of Dodger games, so it's a pretty special occasion when we get to see the Los Angeles Dodgers, the defending National League champions, get to play. But let's go ahead and look at the American League East first. Boston has 103 wins. New York is second in the division. Now, the funny thing about New York, just win-wise, is they're going to be in the, I'm going to say 95 to 97 win category. They may win a few more games. They're at 91 right now. Boston is at 103 on a pace to win 110. Okay, that's why there's such a wide gap in the standings. But that's due to the fact that Aaron Boone, the newly minted first-year manager of the Yankees, has had to move guys around with the loss of Aaron Judge, who's still recovering from a wrist injury, Gary Sanchez, Didi Gregorius, and teams such as that. So the Yankees are, interestingly enough, they're headed to a one-game playoff right now. We'll get to that. I also want to congratulate the Cleveland Indians for winning the Central Division. Now, ironically, as I looked at the Central Division standings, every other team other than Cleveland is under 500. So I don't know if that says much about how good Cleveland is and how they've beaten people up in the Central Division, or just how mediocrely bad that division is regarding baseball. But congratulations to Francisco Lindor and those like Jason Kipnis and others with the Cleveland organization. Congratulations to them for clinching the Central Division, along with the Red Sox, who last week clinched the American League East Division. I think that's the 3rd division title for the Red Sox straight. And, of course, rookie manager Alex Cora is looking great at that particular point. The American League West, interestingly enough, there's somewhat of a race there. I want to congratulate the Oakland A's, who have been on a tremendous run this year, overhauling the Seattle Mariners in the 4th month of the season. July, they really began to turn it on. What they decided to do was acquire Jurius Familia, and I believe players like Blake Trinan in their bullpen. They have a strong bullpen, which is going to allow them to shorten games as they head into the playoffs to 6 innings. So if you're not on top of the A's within 6 innings, you might as well book it that you're going to lose, because Chris Davis is upwards somewhere north of 40 home runs. I think he's at 42. And, of course, I believe it's the last name of their third baseman is Chapman. He's quite a hitter as well, and along with Jed Lowry, I believe, in an Oakland uniform. So congratulations to the A's. Unfortunately, as a supporter of the Mariners, was a little disappointed that the A's caught fire, but they're going to be a tough out, and I wouldn't want to face them if I'm the Yankees or anybody for that matter. But let's go ahead and address those lovely Yankees. The Yankees right now, the last 3 games of the season on the 28th, 29th, and 30th of this month, which is basically 2 weeks from now. The end of the regular season is upon us. That's actually why I'm doing this podcast, to get you all focused for the next 2 weeks on the races, so you'll understand what's going on. The New York Yankees, who I just went over their situation, they acquired Zach Britton, formerly of the Baltimore Orioles, and they acquired some other pitching they needed to for the stretch run. Luis Severino pitching better. The guy I would be worried about is CC Sabathia. CC Sabathia has been good this year, but his last few outings have not been up to par. So that would be a concern for me. But my point that I wanted to bring up specific to the Red Sox and the Yankees is, okay, the Yankees, will finish up with the Boston Red Sox the last 3 games of the season on the East Coast. Now, if we look at the wild card standings, the New York Yankees are barely hanging on to a 1.5 game lead with 2 weeks left in the season. Okay, the reason that's important is if the Yankees somehow lose that 1.5 game lead going into the last 2 weeks of the season by September 30th, let's say they've lost that lead, that means they fly from the East Coast to the West Coast, a 3,000-mile trip, to play a 1-game play-in with the ever-warming, the ever-smoking A's right now. So congrats to them. But I would not want to be the New York Yankees in a position to play a 1-game play-in wild card game with the A's on the West Coast in Oakland. But that may be what happens. I'm not booking it, but I just want to put that out there for you all to think about. Now, the Atlanta Braves in the National League East lead the Philadelphia Phillies by 6.5 games. Congratulations to Atlanta. Ronald Acuna Jr. He may be getting votes for the most valuable player, rookie of the year in the National League. So we're going to see about that. It looks like Atlanta is going to take the East, barring any implosions by the Philadelphia Phillies. What this harkens back to, for those of you that might be old enough to remember, is 1964. The Phillies were leading at the end of the year by about 6 games with 6 to play. And they lost a lead, I believe it was to the Chicago Cubs. Just one of the greatest implosions was the 1964 Phillies. Jim Bunning was on that team. He later pitched a no-hitter in 1970. Actually, I have a copy of that game I might put on the website. But Philadelphia, formerly the Philadelphia A's of the Connie Mack era, but now the Philadelphia Phillies, Citizens Bank Park now. They're 6.5 games out. I'm not looking for them to do too much unless there's a tremendous run in the last 2 weeks. However, Aaron Nola is going to get votes for the Cy Young, and I have to give credit to Philadelphia. Wasn't expecting them to do as well as they have, but they certainly have done quite well. In the Central Division, the Cubs, the lovable Chicago Cubs, 2016 World Champions, hold a slim 2.5 game lead over Milwaukee. Now, Milwaukee has strong starting pitching, which I won't go into now. I'm probably going to do something on them a little bit later. St. Louis, despite their win over the Dodgers tonight, 5-0 Sunday night baseball, nationally televised game, 5-0 with Adam Wainwright pitching a great game for St. Louis. They are 5.5 games out with, you'd say, with about 14 to play. Going to be tough for them to make up that ground. They had their opportunity against the Dodgers and unfortunately lost 3 out of 4 over this weekend that has been just completed. In the wild card race in the National League, here's where it gets intriguing. Milwaukee would make the playoffs. Even if they don't overhaul the Chicago Cubs for the division, they're ahead by 3 games in the wild card standings as I speak. They're followed and tied by the St. Louis Cardinals and the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Los Angeles Dodgers are tied with St. Louis for the second wild card spot right now. And then Torey Lovullo and the Arizona Diamondbacks, who had a tough series with the Houston Astros, who will be playing the Seattle Mariners in Houston starting tomorrow, Monday the 17th. They're 4 games out. Philadelphia at 5. The Washington Nationals at 6, and Pittsburgh at 7. So Milwaukee, St. Louis, Los Angeles, and Arizona are going to be battling it out in the next 2 weeks for the wild card play-in spot. Now, I did not speak to, and I will now, of the National League West. The Colorado Rockies with Nolan Arenado lead the Los Angeles Dodgers by 1/2 game for the second wild card. For the first wild card spot, followed by Arizona at 4.5 out. I don't expect Arizona to overhaul the Dodgers. I believe it's going to be the Dodgers and the Rockies for that spot. Excuse me as I take a drink here. I think that the Dodgers, to me, even though they won 104 games last year, National League Championship, they're not the same team, and they're not necessarily they wouldn't necessarily be the same team with Corey Seager out with a torn UCL and all those things that equated him to be out of the lineup. Then we have the Justin Turner injuries. Then we had some trades and Logan Forsythe to Minnesota, and a lot of changes around the Dodgers. But I have to give the Dodgers credit. They've hung in there. Their problem that I believe is, and this is not to disparage anybody, I'm not happy with their bullpen performance. The back end of their bullpen, and we understand that Kenley Jansen has had a heart murmur issue, treated with medication, things of this nature. But I'm going to tell you right now, the Dodgers bullpen needs to perform if they're going to return to prominence in the National League West and defend their championship, in my opinion. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview of some MLB action. All right. Wanted to also say that I will be doing a little bit more baseball on the podcast side as the postseason approaches. You can always go to the baseball page. You can always get the Buster Only podcasts that I post weekly. He's been around the game a long time. He has a lot of nice connections. You hear a lot of highlights and interviews and things of this nature that I would encourage you to go forth. Now, these are posted on a weekly basis, Monday through Friday. I don't necessarily have the time to post some of that stuff daily just due to other obligations, but I want to let you know it's out there. Go to the baseball page, click on a headline with the MLB baseball feed. We also have minor league baseball feeds as well. So I just want you to go ahead and just know that I have not forgotten baseball, but with the beginning of the football season and the extensive coverage of 4 teams, including Seattle, the Seahawks, the Rams, the Raiders, and the Chargers, things are heating up in that regard. But we're definitely going to be talking a little bit more baseball than we have for the past month or so. So with that said, this edition of the From the Bench podcast for September 17th is done. Now, what will happen is this, my podcast provider, they're on East Coast time. So right now, after this podcast is over, after I've completed it here in just a couple moments, it'll be posted, but it'll be posted in regards to Eastern Time, and right now it's 35 minutes past the 1 o'clock hour on the East Coast. So this will be up immediately, but for those of you that are waking up in the United States, especially on the East Coast, you'll be able to listen. Those of you that are on Twitter, this will be posted immediately. I'm also on YouTube. At that point, I do have a YouTube channel. I don't promote it that much, but it is another avenue where you can hear this podcast if you'd like. I want to thank everybody for listening. I'm your host, Mark Janish, AccessMediaGlobal.com. You can get me at Mark at Access Media is my Twitter handle. Follow me on Twitter as we go ahead and cover the NFL and soon to be the NBA. NBA training camps are going to be starting next month, and we're going to be discussing a lot of baseball playoffs, a lot of NBA training camp as we get into the month of October. For AccessMediaGlobal.com's From the Bench podcast, I'm Mark Janish, founder and host and creator of AccessMediaGlobal.com and this podcast. You have a great evening and a good week, and we'll talk to you later this week with some NFL updates. Don't forget, the Around the League podcasts are posted weekly. They come out 3 times a week. I'll be posting some of those. Also, the Richard Deitch Sports Media podcasts. Usually, those are up Thursday or Friday of each week. Unfortunately, there was no podcast this week, but hopefully that'll be rectified next week. So these are some of the regular continuing programming options that you have. If you go to the NCAA page, you'll be able to get some NCAA news. If you go to the football page, don't forget the Power 5 conferences of the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big Ten, the SEC, and the Big 12 is going to be there for you for all you college football aficionados. I'm not that great and not that skilled with college football, but love the Pac-12. Happy to talk to you about some Big Ten football. Michigan State, I have my eye on. Ohio State, I have my eye on. Michigan and Jim Harbaugh's. I don't know if he's got a march to the end of things as far as his employment tenure with Michigan, but we'll have to see. These are some of the things I'm keeping an eye on, but if I don't talk about them, that doesn't mean they don't appear at AccessMediaGlobal.com. For now, I'm Mark Janish, wishing you a very pleasant week and a very pleasant evening. For the September 17th, 2018, From the Bench podcast, MLB style, I'm Mark Janish.